So, audiences loved Beethoven's grumpy and dynamic character, but it was a change because back in Beethoven's day, or just before Beethoven's day, you weren't rude to the aristocracy. You weren't rude to rich people. Rich people could really do you damage if you were rude to them. Mozart was never rude to the aristocracy. He was always polite, but sometimes the aristocracy took advantage of Mozart because of that. Mozart would write a piece of music for somebody, and that person would say, "Oh, Mozart, I'll pay you later," but he'd never get around to paying him. Or he'd do a concert and he wouldn't get paid for it. The rich people thought that they could do kind of what they wanted. But Beethoven changed that. He was a real strict businessman. He drove a hard bargain. He always got paid for his music, and if somebody didn't pay him for something that he wrote or a concert that he did, he would tell everybody about it, and he would ruin people's reputations. Whoa, that was tough to do, but he did it and he got away with it. He was kind of a man of his time, because if you think about it, when Beethoven was 6 years old, it was 1776, and in our country, something happened. There was a piece of paper that was signed that turned us into a country of our own. What was that piece of paper called? You are correct. It is the Declaration of Independence. And after the Declaration of Independence, we fought our revolution, our war of independence. Now, when Beethoven was 19 years old, France had its own revolution. And France is right next door to Germany. So Beethoven was really happy that people were taking over their own governments. Before Beethoven's time, most governments were kings and queens and princes and princesses. But when the revolutions came, people took over their own government. They voted for the government that they wanted, and it was a new thing, and Beethoven was really excited about it. After the French Revolution, a guy named Napoleon took over the government, and even though he promised to be a democratic sort of leader, he ended up declaring himself an emperor, which was even worse. Beethoven was furious. He had actually dedicated a piece of music to Napoleon because Napoleon was going to be the savior of France. But after Napoleon declared himself emperor, Beethoven took back that dedication. So Beethoven's personality kind of went along with this new movement for people to control their own government. He actually told a prince one time, a man who gave Beethoven money to write pieces of music and so forth. He said, "What you are is by accident of birth. I made myself what I am today. There are thousands of, and will be thousands of princes and princesses, but there is only one Beethoven." He said that sort of stuff, and people loved him because he was right. But actually, I'd like to talk about something different. Beethoven had a different side to him. He was grumpy, and he was angry sometimes, but he loved nature. He would take walks in nature almost every day when he was in Vienna. He'd walk right out of the town and through the woods. And a lot of his music is about nature, about the beauty of nature and the trees and the birds and the rocks. And the streams and the trees. One piece of music especially is called the Pastoral Symphony. It was his 6th symphony. We already know about his 5th symphony. Dun, 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 dun. And we know about his Ninth Symphony. But the Sixth Symphony was a Pastoral Symphony. The Pastoral Symphony was first performed in 1808 during the same concert where he performed his Fifth Symphony. Dun, 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 dun. But the Pastoral Symphony was really different than from the Fifth Symphony. The Fifth Symphony was, Beethoven said, the Fifth Symphony was destiny knocking on the door. But the Sixth Symphony was all about nature. It was a walk in the country and how Beethoven felt about it. In that symphony, there are all kinds of cool parts. The symphony actually has 5 different parts, 5 little pieces that make up the whole symphony. They call them movements. And the first movement has a really great melody. The second movement of the symphony is actually called Scene by the Brook. And at the very beginning, you can actually hear the rippling of a brook and the water of a brook flowing past Beethoven. At the end of that second movement, there's a great part where you can hear birds singing. And Beethoven really went out and listened to birds, and the songs in the symphony are really like the real birds. As a matter of fact, with every bird call that happens, he actually wrote in the score, this is a whippoorwill, this is a cuckoo, this is a nightingale. And you can hear the birds singing right in the symphony. Many years after he composed the Sixth Symphony, Beethoven was walking in the woods with a friend of his, and he stopped one place by the brook and he said, "You know, here's where I composed Scenes by a Brook. And the yellow hammers up there, the quails, the nightingales, the cuckoos round about, composed with me." The third movement is kind of interesting. Beethoven comes upon some people dancing a country dance in the forest. Yeah, I don't see any people around here. I'm pretty much on my own. But it's still great to imagine that there would be people in the middle of the forest dancing a country dance. But the fourth movement, that's the cool one. It starts off with a big thunderstorm. and you can hear the rain starting, the thunder rolling, and a big downpour with lightning and thunder. We had one of those not too long ago. Right in Sila. And then there's a fifth movement of the Pastoral Symphony that just again shows the joy that Beethoven feels walking in the woods. So now it's your turn, and this week you don't need to take a picture of you performing anything or write anything down, but I would like you to go back to the targets and click on the link that has the Pastoral Symphony. There's also some other links to other Beethoven songs. Some of them you know already, but I'd love you to listen to the whole thing. As I said, there are 5 different parts. It takes a while to listen to it, about a half an hour, about as long as watching a television show. But I think you can do it, especially if you close your eyes and start just thinking about being out in nature and the birds and the brooks and the thunder and lightning and the way it makes you feel. So that's your assignment for this week. See you next week.